But in regards to Rayshard Brooks, the Rashard Brooks shooting that took place in Atlanta, one cop shot Rayshard Brooks in the back twice, shot dead. My opinion on this entire case hasn't changed. It hasn't changed since the first time I saw the video, which is this. Rayshard Brooks resisted arrest. He stole a taser from one of the officers, pointed it at the officer. I feel bad for Rayshard Brooks' family, friends. Don't feel bad for Rayshard Brooks. If you're dumb enough in society to scuffle with officers, fight officers, steal a taser, point it and shoot it at an officer, it's probably a death wish. Let's just call it for what it is. You might as well hang yourself. If that's what you're going to do, you're probably not going to make it. And I believe the way that the DA has handled this whole situation is disgusting. And we have the evidence to prove that the DA over there in Atlanta, Georgia, is a double-talking scumbag. But first, one of the police officers, the police officer that is actually going to testify against the cop who shot Rayshard Brooks, is speaking out. He did an interview with MSNBC. His name is Devin Brosnan. So Officer Devin Brosnan and his attorney spoke to MSNBC, and he talked a little bit, the lawyer responded to the charges against his client. Have a listen to this.
If you look at the video, as Officer Brosnan approaches, and Officer Rolfe is already there, he doesn't even know that Mr. Brooks has been shot at first. He doesn't even realize that first, Devin. And he goes up there, and he's trying to figure out, is this scene secure? Is it safe? He knows that his taser has been taken from him. You can't see any blood at that point, to be overly graphic here. So he puts his foot, and he told the DA this, he puts his foot, he thought on his hand or on his arm, to make sure he couldn't get a weapon because he didn't know what the situation was. So literally for a matter of seconds, he puts his foot on his arm to make sure he can't grab a weapon. Then he realizes what's going on. He can see his taser is off to the side because it's got a flashlight on it, and he can see the taser. So he gets up, and Officer Brosnan goes and gets the taser, puts it in his holster. Other officers are now arriving within 50 seconds, and Officer Rolfe runs and gets his first aid kit. He was not standing on his shoulders. This description by the DA is completely belied by the video if you look at it. It's all on video.
All right, I got to tell you something. This lawyer's making a lot of sense. You tell me. Watch the video. It does look like this officer is trying to figure out if the situation is safe. It does look like that this officer did not know if this man was shot right away. And he puts his foot over his arm or his hand. You're going to charge a police officer for that? It's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard in my life. It is insane. And the only reason why they did that, make no mistake about it, and we'll get to this DA double talker. We'll get to it. Don't worry. The only reason why they did that is so the DA could charge this officer with 11 counts, including murder, which is absurd. This is a disgrace. I don't think let me be very clear. I don't think this officer, Devin Brosnan, 100% did anything wrong. He did absolutely nothing wrong, and now you're putting him through this? That's not to mention the other cop, which I think is a disgrace, what's happening to him. So Brosnan did speak. It wasn't just his attorney that spoke to MSNBC. Brosnan was asked what he thought of Rayshard Brooks. Have a listen to this answer.
So my initial encounter with him, I felt he was friendly. He was respectful. I was respectful to him. And I felt like, he seemed like someone who potentially needed my help. And I was really just there to see what I could do for him and make sure that he was safe.
And, based on the video, seems like this officer's telling the truth. What did this guy do? He didn't do anything wrong. And now you're charging him? And you're basically saying you better testify against this officer or we're going to do blah, 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 blah. This is so disgusting. Let me tell you something. This DA is such a piece of crap. He is such a piece of crap. And this has nothing to do with race, why I'm saying this. He's just a piece of garbage. This is Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard Jr. Let me tell you something, why this guy is a liar and a scumbag and a disgrace. This is the guy who should go to jail, by the way, not these police officers. A few weeks ago, just a few weeks ago, folks, some kids in a car were tased by police officers. Remember, this entire case that took place with Rashard Brooks, It has to do with a taser, right? Is a taser a deadly weapon? Yada, yada, yada. This is the same district attorney who charged this officer with murder. Listen to what Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard Jr. said a very short time ago about if a taser is a deadly weapon. Listen to this.
It's not a lethal weapon. It's a non-lethal weapon.
Okay. It's not a lethal weapon. It's a non-lethal weapon. Now, these were comments he made this week in regards to the Rayshard Brooks situation. But wait. Listen to what he just said 2 weeks ago. Remember, I told you, he said something completely different about tasers when cop used it against some college students. Have a listen to this.
And charged with aggravated assault of Ms. Pilgrim, and this is for pointing a taser at Mrs. Pilgrim. And as many of you all know, under Georgia law, a taser is considered as a deadly weapon under Georgia law.
Okay, so do we need to hear that again? Did you hear what this man just said? 2 weeks ago, he just said a taser can be used as a deadly weapon. And then, when talking about the specification, Rashard Brooks, he simply says, it's not a lethal weapon. It's a non-lethal weapon. So this is the perfect definition of politics and double talk. I don't care what the color of your skin is. I don't care whether you're a police officer or in the Black Lives Matter movement. You want to talk about racial injustice? You want to talk about police brutality? Fine. No problem. But you also need to talk about injustice in general. And I'm going to tell you something. What is happening to these two police officers is an injustice. I would even go as far as to call it a racial injustice. And the reason why I call it a racial injustice is because I personally believe that if these two officers were African American and if Rayshard Brooks was white, there would be no charges filed and we would not be talking about this case. Now, I understand why these Black Lives Matter movement protests are going on. I don't deflect away from that. I understand they want racial equality. I understand it's about police brutality. This case, let me be very clear here. This case has absolutely nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with the fact that Rayshard Brooks is black. It has nothing to do with the fact that these two officers are white. You know what it has to do with? I'll tell you what it has to do with. It has to do with a man that had a criminal background who acted like an idiot, resisted arrest, fought officers, grabbed their taser while running, turned around, pointed at an officer, and shot it. And that is why Rayshard Brooks, make no mistake about it, is 6 feet underneath the ground. Make no mistake about it, that is exactly why that situation happened. Now, I understand that the officer who fired the shots after Rayshard Brooks was on the ground may have kicked him. And if that is the case, then you know what? You want to fire the guy. I'm okay with that. If you want to even, convict him on something like a battery charge, fine. But these other charges are absolutely absurd and ridiculous. And you heard it from the Fulton County District Attorney, Paul Howard. You heard it himself. This is about politics. The man is a two-faced scumbag liar. He just said 2 weeks ago that a taser can be used under Georgia law, can be described under Georgia law as a deadly weapon. And then a few days ago, he says it's not a lethal weapon. It's a non-lethal weapon. Well, which one is it? And why won't people ask this man that question? Why? Because they're afraid. They're afraid of the backlash. God forbid you question this guy because he's black. God forbid. This is absurd and it is ridiculous. And I'll tell you something. As angry as I am of what took place with Ahmaud Arbery and Philando Castillo, as angry as I am at what Officer Chauvin did to George Floyd, I am just as angry at Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard. My anger is just as high, the same level of anger. Because if you're going to be upset and angry over racial injustice, well, guess what? Guess what? Make no mistake about it. This is my opinion. These two white officers, this is a racial injustice. They are attacking these two officers because they are white, not because one of those officers shot and killed Rayshard Brooks. Make no mistake about it. They are white. And you had two white officers and one black man by the name of Rashard Brooks, who is now dead because he resisted arrest and he pointed a taser at an officer and shot it. And I'm going to tell you something, and I'm going to say it again, and I have to say it over and over again before people understand that disagree with me. I don't care what the color of Rayshard Brooks' skin is. I don't care. Here's what I will say. Anybody in society, man, woman, transgender, black, white, Asian, I don't care. If you are dumb enough to steal a taser off of an officer after assaulting him and then point it and shoot it at an officer, I don't feel bad for you if you're dead. I don't feel bad.
And we just learned that the officer, Officer Rolfe, who's accused of shooting, or who actually did shoot Rayshard Brooks, has now been moved within his jail facility over security concerns.
Yeah.
He's scheduled to appear later today in court.
Yeah, it doesn't. It makes zero sense to me. This whole situation is disgusting.
Well, and the worst part about it is the DA Paul Howard is actually up for re-election this year. And so there's a thought process that he is most likely pandering to one specific race by making this decision. And you're right, it is 100% a racial injustice. And if equality is the answer, this is not how you get there. If the answer is erasing all stereotypes across the country and prejudices that are taking place, this is decisions like this are not how that is accomplished on a national level.
All right, so let me open up the phone lines on this. And this is the question that I will ask people that are listening right now. Are we wrong here? Am I wrong? Do you not have a problem with the district attorney 2 weeks ago saying that when you use a taser, it is a deadly weapon under Georgia law, and then a couple days ago saying it's not a lethal weapon? Does that not bother you? Or does it bother you like it bothers me? It should bother anybody. I don't care what the color of your skin is.